which will begin with domestic policy. Hi, everybody. You good? You got water? Oh, good. Awesome. All right. District 1, Congresswoman Diana DeGette could not be with us tonight, but we have her Republican opponent, Mr. Caspar Stockham. Caspar served over 14 years in the United States Air Force as a weapons and also communications specialist. He is the former president of American Conservatives of Color and co-founder and CEO of All Star Success Online. He and his wife Carroll are radio show hosts and Christian marriage coaches as well. Caspar Stockham is the author of The Golden Business Solution and is in the final stages of completing his new book, which is called Shattered Mirrors. Caspar analyzes and redesigns sales plans, compensation plans, programs, and materials for direct sales and marketing opportunities. Welcome. Hello, everybody. And next to him is Congressman Jared Polis. Jared Polis was first elected to Congress in 2008, and during his time there, he has turned big ideas into action. Before the age of 30, he launched 3 successful startup companies and used his earnings to start schools for underserved kids. He founded 2 innovative charter schools, the New America School, where he served as a superintendent, to extend the benefits of English literacy and a high school liberal arts education to new immigrants. Jared Polis also founded the Academy of Urban Learning, which educates homeless teens or those from unstable living environments. In Congress, Polis serves on the powerful Committee on Rules, the Committee on Education and the Workforce, and the Committee on Natural Resources. He also serves on the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, is a Democratic parliamentarian to the whip, the vice chairman of the New Democratic Coalition. There's a few more. It's not your birthday, is it? The co-chairman of the LGBT Equality Caucus, and additionally, Polis chairs the U.S.-Mexico Congressional Caucus, as well as the Congressional Caucus on Nepal. Whew, okay. Jared, I have stuff. What was that thought? I skipped. You're by yourself tonight. Somebody ask questions to you first. Okay, Caspar? I'm sorry. Just fly right ahead. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
For a domestic question. Very good. And then we'll get to you, Jared. House domestic. This was written tonight. How do you hope to grow the economy and jumpstart jobs?
Thank you for that question, Kyle. So, my name is Caspar Stockham. I'm running in Congress to CD1 against my opponent, who is not here tonight, I might add.
Right.
I have a jobs plan and working in the community. That is my main focus, is working in the Black and brown community, because those communities have been totally underserved by my opponent. So my jobs program stands for Jobs, Opportunity, Business, Safety, and Security. When you put safety and security back into those areas, you allow for businesses to come into those areas. You allow for more business, more opportunity, more jobs. That is what we need to do across the board. But I'm going to start in the Black and brown communities and work out from there, because a rising tide raises all boats if the boats are in the water. In the Black and brown community, the boats are in dry dock with holes in them. So we have to repair the boats, get them in the water, and start to help those businesses grow in those communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Caspar, from District 1 now into District 2. As again, I just gave that introduction to Jared Polis. Now let me introduce to you Mr. Nick Morse. Nick Morse is the Republican nominee to Congress in Colorado's 2nd Congressional District. He attended his last 3 years of high school in Colorado Springs and earned his degree from Colorado State University, along with his master's in business administration from Grand Canyon University. Professionally, he was a marketing executive at Madwire Media in Fort Collins before running for office. Politically, he was the treasurer of the Larimer County Republican Party, as well as before he entered this race. He has a wife of 6 years, a 2-year-old daughter, and an energetic, fun-loving dog. All right. So it has been determined beforehand. The 2 candidates flipped the coin. And let me see the notes. Nick Morse, first question to you. Domestic. All right. I thank you people for having big handwriting tonight. Ooh, this is a hard one now. Okay, that's good. Do you support expansion of policies like paid sick leave, sick days, and paid family and medical leave that would enable workers to care for themselves and their families? Why or why not? Nick Morse.
Yes, I do. I hope you guys can hear me all. My name is Nicholas Morse, and I'm obviously running for Congress in Colorado's 2nd Congressional District. I do support this. I understand we have a lot of regulations and taxes right now on small business, but something that we always see increase the productivity and the time lifetime value and revenue earned in businesses is when the workers can take care of themselves outside of work as well. And we live in an incredible district where there's a lot of opportunity to enjoy that time outside of work. So whenever you have a child, and this is something that I've advocated early on, women should not be punished for bringing life into this world. I think our paid leave should be longer, it should be taken care of, and the employer can choose the system in which they want to roll that out. It's not going to be federally mandated. But I do support it. I think family is the nucleus of what makes our society and our community successful, and anything we can do to increase that, including the time that they're at work and giving them opportunities to get out of work whenever it's needed, we should support that.
All right, thank you very much. All right, this question is for you, Jared Polis. What is your position on criminal justice reform and why? Given all the recent police shootings, what steps do you think can be taken in our community to improve police relations and implement better community-oriented policing?
Well, there's a lot of sort of two questions in one there. With regard to criminal justice reform, I've been a strong supporter of bipartisan efforts to make sure that we don't fill our prisons with people that fundamentally have health issues with regards to drug abuse or petty crimes. I think it's critical that we do a better job with rehabilitation and breaking the vicious cycle of addiction that's hurt too many families in Colorado and across the country. With regard to law enforcement, our law enforcement community, and there's improvements we've made on both sides, need to do a better job with community policing and earning the trust in the communities in which they work. We have all different kinds of communities across our state of Colorado. And it's very important for law enforcement to be in those communities with cops that have the trust of those who they work with every day, the store owners, the families in those communities, so crimes are reported and people don't seal their lips when law enforcement comes around. I think communities need to do a better job making sure that they acknowledge the role of police professionals and sheriff's department professionals in keeping communities and property safe.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. The next round will come back to you guys again. All right, now let's go to District 4. U.S. Representative Ken Buck learned the value of hard work from his grandfather, who opened a shoe repair store really in the 1930s. One of 3 brothers, Ken worked his way through high school, college, and law school as a janitor, truck driver, furniture mover, ranch hand, and football coach. And after law school, Ken became a prosecutor working for the U.S. Department of Justice, the Colorado U.S. Attorney's Office, and the DA of Weld County. Ken is a Christian and a leader in his profession and the community. As a member of the U.S. Congress, Ken calls for a return to conservative principles to rein in government, cut massive spending, and pass a constitutional balanced budget amendment. Ken's wife Perry served as the vice chair and secretary of the Colorado Republican Party and is currently a representative in the Colorado House. We saw her up here earlier. They live in Windsor, where Perry also owns a small business. So welcome. And then we have Bob C., who is a teacher, a writer, musician, and activist with over 25 years of experience advocating for students, for parents, and families. Bob earned his Bachelor of Music Education from the University of Memphis in 1984, and 1 year of teaching in Memphis, he then decided he was coming to Colorado to be near his grandparents. He accepted his current position as the Director of Bands and Choirs at Lamar High School in 2007. He's been a strong advocate for education, for mental health as well, and equal opportunities for all people. He believes that all people deserve to have the same opportunities regardless of the gender, ethnicity, or other differences they may have. Bob loves the beauty of our state, who doesn't this time of year, that has become his home, and he is committed to preserving and protecting our environment. Bob lives in Lamar with his wife Ginger. He has 3 sons, a beautiful daughter-in-law, and 2 very, very handsome, as I turn the page, grandsons, who are 3 and 1. Okay. So guys, apparently I'm messed up. You're supposed to answer the same question. I'm sorry, you guys, okay? If you want to answer them like later on, we can. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Again, both have a minute to answer domestic policy, okay? And this time around, I believe, Bob, you were answering first, right? As a coin toss directed. Okay, do you support policies that would make it easier to access the ballot, such as online voter registration, automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, and expanded early and absentee voting? Why or why not?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. Democracy depends on everybody voting, everybody participating. This is not a spectator sport. The easier we can make it for people to participate, the less barriers there are between the voters and their government, the better our government is for it. Democracy requires vigorous debate, but it also requires open access to ballots. We need online voting. That would be a great idea. I support same-day registration. I support anything we can do that will make the vote more accessible to more people. I still have 27 seconds.
Your brief is good, right? After all this, you watch it on TV? Go ahead.
Yes, we need to make the ballot accessible to as many people as possible and encourage everyone to be out to vote.
Ken?
I also support ballot access in any way and every way possible. I think that Colorado has made great improvements in ballot access in the last decade. And I think that all Americans should welcome and encourage folks to participate, and we should do everything we can to make our laws consistent with that. And so I think the strides have been great in America. What I am concerned about are folks that are not eligible to vote, or folks that vote more than once. I can tell you as the district attorney in Weld County, we had a small number of fraud cases that were presented to us. Typically it was a father whose son or daughter was off at college and took the call and filled out the ballot and signed it and sent it in. So it wasn't something that we prosecuted, but I think we have to be very vigilant when it comes to fraud.
Okay, thank you both. All right, now to District 5. Congressman Doug Lamborn could not be here tonight, but his Democratic opponent, Misty Plowright, is here. Misty has worn a lot of hats in her life and has seen life from many different perspectives. Her personal history and life experience has really shaped her political philosophy as well as her overall worldview. At a very young age, she was sent to live with her grandmother in Arkansas, and she was raised as a Southern Baptist. Then at 13, she was reunited with her mother, and they moved to a larger city. Working 3 jobs at times, Misty's mother did the best she could to provide. She knows what it is to rely on public assistance. Free school lunches were sometimes the only time she had something good to eat all day. Misty believes in finding solutions to problems and not compromises. Welcome, Misty. Hello, hello. So I will ask you one of the domestic questions that was submitted. Okay. How do we have an immigration policy that is both humane and addresses security concerns? Do you support programs to protect immigrant families from deportation, such as the deferred action for childhood arrivals and the deferred action for parents of Americans and lawful permanent residents? Why or why not?
Well, first off, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Specifically in answer to this question, one issue that I have talked about a fair amount in my campaign is the deportation of our veterans. There are a number of people who have served in the U.S. military, have fought in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere where we've used our military, and they come back and sometimes stuff goes wrong, they do something, they get in trouble because of a TBI or PTSD, and something happens. And then we have the gall to deport them and say, you're not welcome in this country anymore. That's absolutely wrong, and that's got to stop immediately. Outside of that, I absolutely support those deferred action programs. If we have, especially in cases where you have kids and entire families fleeing murderous regimes, we can't turn people away that are not when they have that to look forward to.
Thank you very much. Now on to District 6. Congressman Mike Hoffman grew up in Aurora. He attended Aurora Public Schools, built a small business, and still calls Aurora home. He began his distinguished career in public service at the age of 17. Inspired by his dad's service, Mike enlisted in the United States Army, and today Mike is the only veteran in the Colorado delegation and the only member of Congress to have served in both Iraq wars. First elected to Congress in 2008, Mike Hoffman serves on the Armed Services Committee and the Veterans Affairs Committee, where he is the chairman for the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. Mike and his wife Cynthia were married in 2005, just before he deployed to Iraq with the U.S. Marine Corps. He attends Faith Presbyterian Church in Aurora. And State Senator Morgan Carroll is joining us as well. A lifelong Coloradan, Morgan Carroll was raised Jewish, has devoted herself to her community and to her family. Her mother attended Aurora High School and went on to become a pioneering woman in law. Her father, a Colorado native, was a relentless advocate and attorney. So after high school, Morgan spent years working at a gas station, at a video store, at an office as an office secretary to pay the bills and put herself through law school. Following law school, Morgan and her mom opened up a law firm advocating for people with disabilities. Seeing a need for creative solutions, Morgan was elected to the Colorado House of Representatives and then to the state Senate. In 2013, she became only the second woman in Colorado history to be selected as the president of the Colorado Senate. Welcome to you both. Thanks for coming. Okay, I got my cheat sheet here. So, Morgan, Carroll, you're going to answer the first question, and here it is. Morgan, same question, you'll go first. What can we do to promote renewable energy and help populations who are dependent on oil and gas?
Good question. So at the state level, we've been able to get significant progress by doing things like doubling the renewable energy standard. At the federal level, we have a couple things we can do. We can end subsidies for fossil fuels and make sure that we are actually refocusing our financial priorities on converting to renewable energy. What if and how we fund mass transit as part of our transportation funding can have a significant impact also on climate change issues, which is sort of a subset within the renewable sector there. We have been able to increase financing at the state level. I'd like to see a federal version of this where we allowed solar leasing, so for little or no money down, people can do affordable monthly payments, lower their utility bills. We quadrupled rooftop solar in Colorado in just a short few years by taking steps like that. And then the other is about addressing transition. We should have job training and retraining for those who are tied to the fossil fuel industry so that they can successfully transition to a clean energy economy.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I supported all of the above strategy. And I think that in terms of renewable energy, the role of the federal government is really to focus on, certainly I've supported tax credits for wind and solar, but to focus on research to make renewable energy scalable, to make it cost competitive. We don't want to go down the track of certain biofuels like ethanol. I think to use a food crop for energy, it makes no sense environmentally, and it makes no sense from a cost standpoint in terms of what it does to agriculture. And I think it's more important for America to be energy independent. It's so important for America to have a balance between jobs and between the environment, so we're not exporting jobs overseas because of higher costs to countries that have no environmental standards, and we're importing those products from those countries.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, now into District 7. Congressman Ed Perlmutter is a lifelong resident of the Colorado's 7th Congressional District. He and his 3 daughters all graduated from Jefferson County Public Schools. Now he lives in Arvada with his wife Nancy, who's a public school teacher, who also has 3 children, who also went to Jefferson Public Schools. Ed Perlmutter is known for listening to his constituents at the grocery store or front porches, whether helping seniors access their Medicare benefits, fighting to complete the new VA Medical Center in Aurora, or working across the aisle to secure funding for the Orion Space Capsule program. Ed always goes the extra mile for people of Colorado. Ed believes everyone who works hard should have a fair shot at the American dream. That means keeping good jobs here in our state, making sure all our kids have access to quality public schools and affordable higher education, and creating economic security so that everyone can pay off debt and save for retirement. Now, his challenger. Do you know how many times I've said, how do you say his name? This is George Athanasopoulos.
Yeah, Athanasopoulos.
Athanasopoulos, I've heard you say it.
It's really the Greek version of Smith.
So there's George Smith tonight. Thank you. So sorry. Born in Denver, grew up in Wheat Ridge. His parents emigrated here from Greece as adults and owned a small business in Wheat Ridge that some of you may have been to, the Apple Ridge Cafe. George is a product of Jefferson County Public Schools as well, and later attended the University of Colorado at Boulder. He also interned for Senator Wayne Allard in D.C., working in the Senate Armed Services Committee section of his staff. Now, following the attacks on 9/11, he was moved to join the Army and completed 4 tours in Iraq. In 2013, he was accepted to the United States Army's prestigious Asymmetric Warfare Group. In 2014, George was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and concluded that his true calling is to continue to serve his country through political office. So, thank you both. First up is Ed, don't let it. Are you ready? Okay. What policies do you believe can help lift the next generation out of poverty? What federal reforms do you support to reduce income inequality in this country? Please explain.
Thank you, Kyle, and thanks to the Federation for underwriting this and to JCRC for hosting this. I'd like to start with education. I think that's key, both K through 12 as well as higher education. And I think that's what lifts all people out of poverty. We've seen the investment by the United States and by the state of Colorado to continue to shrink in terms of certainly higher education. And I like to start with reducing the interest rate that our students face when they borrow money to go to institutions of higher learning, whether it's trade schools, four-year colleges, community colleges, because that's a burden for them that will make it difficult for them to invest in new businesses themselves and the like. I think that's the most important thing. If I can get that accomplished by reducing the interest rate on student debt, that will move a lot of people forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I would say the first thing we can do to help the next generation is to stop piling debt onto their backs. The debt today is almost $20 trillion. Where I disagree with my opponent is the day he took office, the U.S. national debt was $8.673 trillion, so it's almost doubled. What that means is that for every child in the United States, 18 years and younger, that's $250,000 in debt that we are leaving as our legacy to our children. So while I desperately want to pass a REINS Act, I want to bring back Ronald Reagan's Grace Commission, where we need to completely overhaul the tax code, we need regulatory reform. All of these things are necessary, but before we admit that we have a government we cannot afford and that we are burdening our children with this debt, we are never going to leave them better off than the country that we received that was a legacy from our parents to us.
All right. Thank you all. So the first round of domestic policy questions are over. Now we're moving on to foreign policy. So hello. This is for you. Cass from Stockholm, District 1. Someone submitted this question before this evening. In Europe, there is a popular sentiment towards isolationist policies, as witnessed by the Brexit vote. Should the United States follow this trend, how do you think it would affect international relations, trade, and economics?
That's a great question, Kyle. And did I mention my opponent's not here tonight? Did I mention that she's also not going to debate me in public? But when it comes to foreign policy, the U.S. has been willfully inadequate in their foreign policy for a long, long time. So we need to protect our borders, we need to protect a lot of things, but we need to stop meddling in other countries' affairs. And that's something that we have been doing for a long time, and quite frankly, we've been messing it up. And I wish I could blame it on the Democrat Party, but all parties are doing it, and they continue to do it. So we need to rethink the entire way that we address and deal with foreign entities and foreign organizations, and we need to definitely not deliver $400 million on a pallet in cash. That's probably not a good thing either.
Thank you. Now to District 2. And again, Nick Morris, you will answer this question first, but again, same question for you both.
I got you. I don't think my mic's on though. Please hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I can yell at
No, a new question.
Okay, new question. Go
New
ahead.
question
Sorry.
for you too. Last month, the United States and Israel signed a new memorandum of understanding that calls for the U.S. to provide $38 billion in security assistance and missile defense funding to Israel over the course of 10 years. Do you support security assistance to Israel as called for in this new memorandum of understanding? Are there other steps the U.S. should take to support Israel's ability to defend itself?
I do support this, and also in 2014 we made a similar agreement with some of the missile defense systems that they installed in Israel as well. So with the hatred that's coming out of an Arab state just to the east of them and Iran, we have to support Israel and not be unabashed about it. So absolutely. And I think other ways that we can do this in terms of their economy and through trade is, currently we have an $8 billion outstanding line credit that they can access that they need. We also contribute $3 billion annually to their country, which they can use up to 75% for buying arms that are made by Americans. So these are all things that we can continue to do. We need to continue to support that. We need to actually increase our funding because our access to the Suez Canal down through the Gulf of Aden and around the Arabian Peninsula, that opens up options in terms of Navy to access the Middle East, whereas if those go away, all we have is air and land. So we need to keep all our options open, continue the funding, and it is a system that I do support.
Okay, Jared Polis.
I've been to Israel a number of times. My brothers lived there for a couple of years back now. And to really understand the situation, you have to look at the geography. I mean, you have to see in the Golan how easy it would be to rain rockets down in Israel and why it's critical to maintain that either under Israeli sovereignty or at least in a status where there's no weapons there. To see northern Israel where families live in fear of rockets raining down from Lebanon. Of course, thanks to the Iron Dome funding that I voted for, that America supplied, they're able to shoot down most of those rockets and reduce the risk to Israeli civilians. Israel is a stalwart ally of American interests and American values in a very difficult and challenging region. It's important we maintain our commitment to support Israel. It furthers our security ends for America and also furthers our values as the only country in the region that is democratic, supports full equal rights for women and LGBT Israelis as well.
Okay, thank you both. Now to District 4, Bob C. and Congressman Ken Buck. Bob, you are answering this question first. This person said, I would like to ask about Iran's non-nuclear activity. Iran continues to develop ballistic missiles, continues to support terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and continues to back the brutal Assad regime. What steps should Congress take to address Iran's behavior beyond the nuclear agreement? Would you support legislation to impose new sanctions on Iran for these types of behaviors?
That's a good question. We need to do whatever it takes within reason to get Iran to stop its aggressive behavior in that region. That includes sanctions, that includes using our financial institutions to work against the country, that includes diplomatic efforts to try and bring them into the community of nations. The problem with this area is you have all these countries that have long, tremendous histories of war, and we act as if we're going to resolve this with a single treaty or a single motion, and it won't. We're talking a cultural change, and cultural change requires trust. So yes, we have to be strong with sanctions. Yes, we have to be strong within knowing that there will be consequences for actions, while at the same time, we have to make things like the Iran nuclear power treaty, the deal, which show trust, which develop a relationship, and which can lead to a long-term solution.
Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Iran continues to develop ballistic missiles, continues to support terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and continues to back the brutal Assad regime. What steps should Congress take to address Iran's behavior beyond the nuclear agreement? Would you support legislation to impose new sanctions on Iran for these types of behaviors?
I would support new sanctions on Iran, and one of the great things that we have from Colorado is a resource like Mike Kaufman, who is an expert, having served as a Marine in Iraq, and Mike is really a go-to person in the House on issues like this, and I really appreciate his guidance on things like this. But I think it's important for people to understand that we've handed Iran $150 billion. They are using that money as a state sponsor of terrorism. Every single time they sponsor a terrorist attack, we have to make sure that we're putting sanctions on them and that they understand that there will be a response, whether it is our response or whether it's a response from our allies in the area, that there will be a response and that they will not be able to work outside of the nation's, the compact that we have in the world. And I think it's also important that we not allow them to develop their ballistic missile technology the way we have. And so we really have to be vigilant in how we address these issues.
Okay, thank you very much. Now to District 5, we have Misty Plow right here, representing District 5, and here's your question for you. The Iran Sanctions Act expires at the end of the year. Do you support the reauthorization of the act as a way to ensure that sanctions will be imposed if Iran violates the nuclear deal and to push back against Iran's violations of international obligations related to its ongoing ballistic missile program. What else can Congress do?
Well, absolutely, I support slapping them with sanctions if they do the slightest thing in violation of the nuclear deal. Something I personally would like to see happen a lot more is so anytime this whole nuclear thing comes up with any country, it's like, well, we just want this for our energy. And we say, no, you're trying to get bombs. There is a nuclear technology that is almost impossible to weaponize, and it's called thorium. Thorium reactors are, like I said, they're almost impossible to weaponize, so you can look at a country like Iran and say, okay, you say you're trying to meet your energy needs here. We will help you develop this technology. We'll help you build these. There, your energy problems are solved. If they say, no, we don't want that, it's pretty obvious what they're going after. And then you can deal with them on those terms. So that's what I personally would really like to see happen. And this is technology that we have. We can do this. Colorado had one in operation for 15 years.
Steve, thank you. Now to District 6, Mike Hoffman and Morgan Carroll. Morgan, we'll start with you. This was submitted this evening. What can Congress do to counter domestic and foreign terror threats?
Thank you, Kyle. We need to realize that domestic and foreign terrorism at this point is an international, anytime, anywhere, anyone problem. This means that we need to build as many allies, bridges that we can, because it will require a partnership of intelligence, of sharing information from as many people as possible so that we can early detect, respond, and hopefully prevent anyone who would do harm to this country or our allies abroad. It also means understanding the flow of finances that helps fund terrorist activity either at home or abroad. But the unique danger we're seeing now is a dispersed and decentralized, low-tech and low-cost ability for one person to inflict a profound amount of damage without a lot of notice. We will require local law enforcement, we will require citizen vigilance on this issue, and we cannot afford to isolate in this new international reality of both domestic and international terrorism.
Okay, Mike Hoffman.
I think the first thing we can do is not allow a caliphate to exist, to not allow territory to be controlled by Islamic extremists. That provides motivation for momentum as long as they're seen as ascendant. Certainly it gives an operational center to send out those messages in terms of trying to radicalize individuals. And one of the bills before the Congress of the United States that I support would give the FBI the ability to anybody on the broader terror watch list would give a vetting process before somebody can purchase a firearm and give them, with due process, the ability to deny that purchase and hold them to that same standard for 5 years after they're off the terror watch list, and I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you very much. Now for District 7's question, and we'll start with Congressman Ed Perlmutter.
Hey, Kyle, can I ask you a question? And I don't mean to.
Yes.
I thought we were supposed to flip each time. So I went first time, George, so that there's a.
I thought everyone was first and then the closing. I'm sorry. I'm right? Oh, I'm right.
Uh-oh.
Right?
All right.
Take it out of its time.
First each time.
All right, fine.
Okay, right.
I should have asked it.
Okay. We're going with the flow. Here's the question in any event. What role should the U.S. play in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process?
The U.S. should continue to play the role of the moderator, just as you are, and encourage both sides to come to the table. And it should encourage those countries around Israel, Jordan, maybe Egypt, that would like to play a role in encouraging peace, to participate as well. The U.S., because Israel is such a key friend and partner, cannot back away from that and should not back away from encouraging both sides to come to the table and try and work out those issues that have been sticklers for so many years. We cannot give up. It's too important. And so I think we play the main role as the moderator and the facilitator.
American foreign policy right now prevents any lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinian territories. Please understand that the United States coming in, playing arbiter in these negotiations will have no lasting effect if we don't first address the money coming out of the Gulf, supporting Wahhabism and the other ultra-Orthodox Salafist-inspired strains of Islam. You're going to see the U.S. and Iraq cooperate and launch an attack against Mosul shortly. What that does is, yes, it gains territorial sovereignty. You defeat ISIS. You also create a land bridge between Iran, Syria, Lebanon. Until we address these other larger issues that American foreign policy is doing inexplicably, we're never going to have a peace process that lasts between Israel and the Palestinian people. So,
thank you. So I put the foreign policy questions away. So again, if you're answering second, you get the last say for this time. Okay? All right. So let's start with Casper, Stockton, District 1. Here's a domestic question for you. Social Service Block Grants is a flexible funding stream that pays for a variety of initiatives for vulnerable populations, including children and adults with disabilities. A bill has been introduced in Congress to end federal funding of the Social Services Block Grant. If the legislation reached the floor, would you vote for or against the legislation, and why?
Thank you for the question, Kyle. I'm not that familiar with that particular legislation. I have to get more information on it. But I have sponsored the Disabled, not sponsored, but I support the Disabled Integration Act, which would allow for people like my daughter who has a disability to receive help from home as opposed to an institution. So our government wants to institutionalize most of us as opposed to allowing those individuals to be treated in a home situation. So I would definitely support that measure, and I'd have to get more information on the bill you're talking about.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, for you two guys from District 2, I'm going to read the question for the other person that I read earlier, okay? If I don't remember, so I'm going to read it. And we're going to start with Nick. Okay. What? Okay. Can you answer from like a half hour ago? No, I'm just kidding. All right, so this is what earlier Jared Polis responded to. What is your position on criminal justice reform and why? Is that right, Jared? You talked about that earlier. It was, what?
Wasn't there a second part to the question?
Okay. Given the recent police shootings in our country, what steps do you think can be taken in our community to improve police relations and implement better community-oriented policing?
Yeah, I think this starts at the top, and it's a cultural issue as well. I think we have this narrative in our society right now where we're being encouraged to lash out maybe in a form of social justice that perhaps doesn't exist. So the first thing we do is we make sure we are reminded that we're Americans first. We're not divided by different race groups or where we live, where we grew up, or what affinity we have economically in our society. So that's the first thing I think we need to address. And then with criminal justice, I have similar views with Jared on this. I'm glad that for-profit prisons are going away. I think that needs to end. And I also think that we need more mental health facilities, and that's something I've advocated for a long, long time. For any issue, whether you're born with it or whether it's something that's incurred maybe because you were in a combat zone. So I think we need to get rid of any regulation that puts people in jail for victimless crimes, and we need to lower perhaps the subsidy for having those people detained, because people shouldn't be just a dollar amount for a facility that's housing them.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Jared, this is the question that Nick talked about earlier. Do you support expansion of policies like paid sick days and paid family and medical leave that would enable workers to care for themselves and for their families?
Absolutely, and I think, and I was glad my opponent did as well, but I think one important thing to note is that Whether these issues even come up depends on which party controls the United States Congress. So while there are bipartisan sponsors of paid sick leave bills and family leave bills, the Republican leadership in the House has failed to bring any of those bills up to a vote, even though a majority of the House would likely pass them. These are some of the same issues that Morgan Carroll has championed here in our state legislature that would make a big difference for working families, whether you're able to take time off when you have a child. Both Nick and I have small children. It makes an enormous difference for the health of the child, as well as for the strength of the family, for either and both spouses to be able to do that. What many spouses do is after one of their family leave runs out, then the other one will be able to stay home with the young infant. That's one of the most important things I think that the federal government can do to strengthen American families, the backbone of our country.
Thank you, Jared. Now to District 4, Congressman Ken Buck and Bob C. Bob, again, you'll answer this question first. Under what circumstances do you believe that public taxpayer dollars may be used to fund services provided by religious or religiously affiliated institutions?
Separation of church and state is fundamental to our, not only to our government, but to our culture. If a religious institution is providing a good service, say a food bank or shelter, then we should help that, we should support that. If they're using that money to proselytize, then we have no business for supporting that. That's not a government function. There are some times when we've had disasters, a hurricane hits Florida, and religious groups will show up more interested in passing out religious pamphlets than they are in passing out water and food. That's wrong, and we have no business paying for that as a nation. If private individuals want to do that, that's fine and encouraged. But as a nation, we don't. Religious liberty includes the ability to decide for yourself. It doesn't mean imposing religious values on others. Separation of church and state includes the ability to work together on these joint projects.
I think that the government can provide religious organizations with money when they are providing a service that non-religious organizations would also provide. And so if there is a food bank or what used to be called a soup kitchen, providing food for the homeless, for example, whether it is done by a synagogue, a church, a mosque, or a non-religious organization, I think they should be treated fairly. I don't think that they should be discriminated against, and I don't think they should receive preferential service. I think government should look at who does the job best and provide money for that purpose. I also think that schools and other institutions should be required and are required under the law to allow religious groups to have access to their facilities just like any other group.
Thank you very much. Out of District 5, again with Misty Plowright. This is a question that was submitted this evening. What kind of legislation would you support to ensure that men and women receive equal pay for equal work?
Well, I think that legislation kind of writes itself. I mean, anyone with equivalent qualifications doing the same work should be getting the same amount of pay, and then beyond that, whatever you start at, your annual reviews, well, that's your pay, whether it goes up or down, is going to reflect whatever's on your annual review. I would also like to see expansion of, parental leave. And I say parental leave specifically because I think that if a family has a child, then both parents should be able to spend time with that child, and it shouldn't be a problem. I think, and that also gets rid of the argument, well, when we hire women, they might have a kid, so we're just not going to do that. It completely nullifies that. So those are the kind of things I would like.
All right, Lisa, thank you. Now to District 6. State Senator Morgan Carroll, we'll start with you. Do you believe that employees, whether private or nonprofit, should be able to refuse to provide their employees with insurance that covers birth control services if the employer asserts a religious belief opposed to reproductive health care?
No. I think the medical decisions of the employees are private. I strongly support both the spirit and the letter of the idea of HIPAA. The fact that you can have an employer or your boss weigh in on their personal, whether it is their morally held belief, their intellectually held belief, or any other belief, the fact that your boss could get into your medical business and decide what they will and won't cover based on their opinions, I think is a fundamental intrusion of privacy. And I also think it is a fundamental intrusion in the employer-employee relationship. I think healthcare is a private right, and it should not be a third party's decision to weigh into someone else's business about what kind of healthcare they should or should not have access to.
Well, first of all, I think that the decision ought to be made by the individual. And it ought to be made, what we ought to have is tax incentives to the individual so that it's their policy that they take with them and that they decide what is in that policy. That's one of the reasons and one of the reasons why I think that Obamacare is not working right now is it's the one size fits all. And so, and what had worked in Colorado before, I think, was having a high-risk insurance pool where everybody was, in fact, all insurance policies were taxed, no matter what they were, to go to that to help people with pre-existing conditions. So I think that we can fix Obamacare, but I think one of those fixes is to leave it with the individual. And do I think that employers ought to be, mandated to do this? No. Do I believe that birth control ought to be something that somebody can purchase over the counter without a prescription? Yes, and I've co-sponsored legislation to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I just picked the last domestic policy question, also healthcare related. So for District 7, we'll start with you, Congressman Ed Perlmutter. Do you believe that all individuals in the United States deserve access to high-quality, affordable, non-discriminatory health coverage regardless of income, immigration status, sexual orientation, or some other factor? Why and why not? If so, how would you work to achieve this goal?
Yes. Start with yes. And the achievement of that goal is not an easy one, obviously, but we got a good start with the Affordable Care Act, which did away with discriminating against people with pre-existing conditions, prior injuries. And that was a civil rights effort on the part of the federal government to say folks who had a malady of one kind or another are entitled to be covered. So that's a big step forward. I think secondarily, we've got to make sure that co-ops, for instance, like we've had here in Colorado, have sufficient resources behind them to continue to provide services to the poorest among us and to provide subsidies for those individuals. So I think we took a good step forward, but it's going to take a lot of work to reach that goal that's stated in the question.
I will also say yes, but that's where our agreement ends. Obamacare has been terrible. Healthcare premiums will rise. They're rising right now, about 20.1% for people buying through the exchanges. Healthcare is 18.6% of our economy. It is the most corrupt portion of our economy. Yes, I support repealing Obamacare, but I do not support going back to the way it was, because that was only to the benefit of insurance companies and healthcare providers. What I propose is a combination between health empowerment accounts proposed by Ben Carson and substantial market reforms, because healthcare and the healthcare industry needs it. There should be no reason that EpiPens now cost $600 a pair. That is wrong. That is abuse of the market. So if you want to fix healthcare, it's more freedom, less control, less government, and we have to begin now. We can't afford what we have.
All right, thank you. By the way, bravo to all of you out here, because you were all right at a minute. That was awesome. So now you're awarded with 2 minutes to give your closing statements. Thank you all so much. So let's start in our closing statements, 2 minutes, starting with District 1 and Casper Stock.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, NCJW and JCRC, for this event. I've been out here running this race for about a year now, and I'm wearing 2 pins on my lapel, And I didn't just put them on today. I've been wearing them for the past year. So one is the Israeli-U.S. flag. So I fully support the Israel and Israeli people. I also have a emblem. It's an Arab symbol for the letter N. Christians are being persecuted by the Arabs put this symbol on their door, and then they persecute the Christians over there. And our government is doing very little to support those Christians. My opponent has been in office for over 20 years. She focuses on special interest groups, and she receives a lot of special interest money. I am not going to take any special interest money, and I'm going to be focused on working in the community. I'm also have signed up for a voluntary term limit of 3 terms because I'm not a politician. I want to do what I can do, the best I can do, and I want to get back to my business and get back to my family. I drive for Uber and Lyft at night, and it's very interesting because I drive my constituents around all night. And I have campaign stickers on my car, so when I pull up to pick them up, they look down and say, "Are you really running for Congress?" I said, "I sure am, get in." So we go for a ride and we talk about stuff. We don't talk about R&D. Our country is in trouble because the Republican and Democrat thing is not working. It's dividing us in ways that it's just tearing our country apart. 90% of the people I talk to, and most of those Democrats, like what I have to say because I'm not talking about the typical R&D stuff. I'm talking about going into the community and making things better. I'm going to have my campaign office in 5 Points in the black community. We're going to be working with jobs programs and business programs. The Denver GOP is also going to put their campaign office, and the state GOP is going to put their campaign office there to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, to District 2, because the coin toss, Jared Polis, you get first dibs on the close mic.
I want to thank NCJW and JCRC for hosting this forum, and Shana Tova to everybody in attendance as well. Look, I'm running because I believe that the value of an education is more important than ever in a 21st century society. I got to see that firsthand, starting several technology businesses, being familiar with the kinds of jobs that are growing and opportunities in our economy. I got to see that running a charter school that served at-risk youth and time on the State Board of Education. I visit over 100 public schools across the state, and I worked hard this last session to replace No Child Left Behind with a new and better federal education law, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Part of the next step of that challenge is implementing that new law, as well as making sure that higher education is within the reach and grasp of every American family. At the very time, some advanced degree, whether it's community college or college, some job skill or certification is more important than ever to be successful in our country and have a good job. It's becoming harder and harder to pay for. That's why I support Hillary Clinton's comprehensive plan for college affordability, including debt-free college. I'm a strong supporter of concurrent and dual enrollment systems, which we have across Colorado and which we can do even better on. I have a plan for open source textbooks. I have a plan for income-based repayment for college debt, as well as lowering the interest rate. I think there's a lot we could do to help make sure that more American families, regardless of their geography, their economic background, their race, their gender identity, or sexual orientation, can really achieve their American dream in this country. I'm a big believer in this country, and I'm honored to serve, and I hope that you're willing to support me for 2nd Congressional District. You can find out more at polisforcongress.com. Thank you.
Nick Morse.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having us out tonight. I hope that you've seen the variety of candidates that we have here tonight, and I think Casper and Jared speak to this as well. It's not just about the R&D. I think everyone up here in our bios has had a high quality life experience and is looking to serve you well. Some things that are really important to me that we didn't cover tonight that I'd love to share with you about Veterans Affairs. My father served in the military for 20 years. He was a Navy CV, served 3 tours in Desert Storm, and he's had 16 surgeries and spent over 10 years combating his PTSD. And our government does not do enough for the people who give everything to their country. And so part of my campaign promise has been to take care of veterans, increase pay for soldiers who are NCO or lower, and then allow TRICARE Prime and TRICARE Standard to be used at the first necessary time off base and be seen by a specialist right away. I speak from my experience because I've seen the struggles that my dad has had, and when he finally got his waiver to go off base, he was able to realize what he was diagnosed with and combat it. He owns a multi-million-dollar business now. He was honorably discharged, and his life experience has had a huge impact on me. Now, when it comes to education, our district has 2 major universities and quite a few secondary universities, which the composite probably equals the same as CU and CSU. But we're putting roughly 100,000 students into our economy every year, an average of $40,000 of debt. I don't support debt-free college. The model isn't there. Even if you tax the top 1%, 100% of their income, it still only pays for 3 years in college with that model. So I support more alternative funding for trade schools. I support a pre-tax incentive to pay off your student debt, which will save you $60, $70 every 2 weeks. And I also support a 5% increase in write-off for businesses if they contribute to that student loan repayment. So it helps small businesses, it helps students entering the workforce, and it helps the people in my district. You can go to nickmorseforcongress.com, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you both. Now let's go to District 4, and Congressman Ken Buck will start.
I think this is an important election that we have to really examine from the top of the ticket all the way to the bottom of the ticket. For the last 7.5 years, we have had a president who has acted contrary to the interests of Israel and the United States interests in the Middle East. The Iran deal was a bad deal. It was a bad deal for the United States. It was a bad deal for our allies all across the world. Allowing Iran to develop a nuclear weapon after 10 years, giving Iran $150 billion, and removing the ballistic missile restrictions on Iran are bad. We have a BDS movement that has grown in this country. And I was stunned the other day when I was in the Capitol building to see that the Democrat Party had reserved a room in the Capitol for the BDS movement to have a reception. I was embarrassed. It is not appropriate in this country to have that kind of anti-Semitic movement. I disagree with President Obama on many of his policies, but the one that really I think is concerning is when he starts dictating to Israel where they can have settlements and where they cannot have settlements. Our role in the Middle East should be to foster dialogue, but it should not be to dictate policy. I was honored to attend the speech at the joint session of Congress with the Prime Minister, and I saw a real leader talking about U.S.-Israeli relations and what needed to be done. Anti-Semitism in this country is rising, and it's got to be stamped out. And we have to make sure that the right message is sent to Americans, but also to our friends and to our enemies, that we will not tolerate discrimination against Israel or Jews here at home. Thank you.
First, again, I'd like to thank everyone involved in this for putting this together. I went into music education 30 years ago because I loved music. I stayed because I fell in love with my students, and I would do anything for my students. I married a woman who had 2 children, and then we had a biological child together, and I only bring that up to say how important it is to create a legacy. That legacy for me was fulfilled when my adopted son adopted sons of his own. We have to consider what our actions and what our rhetoric today is doing for those children. Are we leaving them with unfathomable debt, or are we going to take responsibility, create a tax code that's fair to everyone, reduce the debt, and move forward? Are we going to teach them that it's more important to fund a corporation than it is to fund a human being? Are we going to teach them that health care is a privilege only reserved for those who can afford it, and for those who can't, it's just too bad? I am tired of seeing jars on gas station countertops that say the Smith family's daughter has cancer, can you please contribute to that? That is not public health policy. I have a student who just turned 18 who wants to go to college. He committed the crime of coming here when he was 3 years old. Someone told him to go back to his country. This is his country. He's just as American as my sons. These are serious issues that require serious deliberation by people who want to work for the American people and not against the president. My students, your children, your grandchildren deserve the best we can give them, the best government, the best services, and the best life. And the only way to do that is to really reconsider our values, think about the path we're on, and change directions while we still have time. Thank you very much.
And now with District 5, Mr. Clever.
Well, I would have loved to have heard from my opponent tonight, but he never shows up to anything. I tend to think that if you're going to try to represent people, you should engage with people, hear their concerns. The kind of central pillar of my campaign is about a new approach, a 21st century approach. And there are so many problems that we have today that have solutions. And when I talk about solutions, because I hate compromises. Compromises are lose-lose, no one's happy with them, and they don't fix the problem. But if you find a solution, you find something where everyone's concerns get addressed, and the problem gets solved. You know, I have people who are militantly pro-life behind me. I have people who are militantly pro-choice behind me. And they're both behind me because of my stance on abortion and trying to fix that issue so that it's not an issue anymore. The same thing can be applied to defense, what I was talking about earlier in regards to Iran and Iran's nuclear program and what they're trying to do and going to thorium reactors. There are solutions to all of the problems that we face, but we have to come up with the political will and actually listen to people, find out what those concerns are so that we can actually address them and arrive at solutions. Frankly, when I look at our government, I see one that no longer serves the people, hasn't for a long time, and I see corruption throughout all of it. My own campaign, I do not take any kind of big money, I don't take any kind of PAC money. I've had a lot of PACs offer money, and I said, I'm happy to take your endorsement, but I don't want your money. I think that's a problem in politics. Please go to mistyforcongress.com to learn more. Thank you.
And now, starting off with District 6, in terms of closing statements, here's Representative Michael.
Colin, I want to thank you so much for moderating this kind of forum, and I want to thank the sponsors as well. And all those who have been involved in AIPAC, and I know there's quite a few here, it is such an extraordinary organization in terms of supporting Israel, and I was able to go in 2009 to Israel, hosted by AIPAC, and gain such a much greater understanding of the challenges that impact the country. And it was my second time in Israel. I went there in the 1980s as a junior officer in the United States Marine Corps. I can tell you it's a much better deal going with AIPAC. But I have a very diverse military background, having served in the 21 years combined military experience in the Army, the Marine Corps, the Reserve components, 5 overseas deployments, 2 in combat. I'm able to bring that background to the Armed Services Committee, where I challenge the Pentagon. I challenge the Pentagon on wasteful spending. It is not about more spending to meet our defense needs. It's about cutting wasteful spending and utilizing that to fund the deficits we have in capability right now in terms of our national security. I'm also honored to serve as a Marine Corps combat veteran on the House Veterans Affairs Committee as a subcommittee chairman, where I work very hard to fix what is really a broken Department of Veterans Affairs, where the leadership of that organization is marred in a really a culture of corruption and bureaucratic incompetence, where despite tremendous funding, 86% increase in their budget since I've been in Congress in 2000, it started in 2009, they failed to meet our nation's obligations to the men and women who have sacrificed so much in the service of this country. I'm ranked as, by the Lugar Institute as the 25th most bipartisan member of Congress, and I pride myself in reaching across the aisle to find solutions. Thank you again so much for hosting this tonight.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kyle, and for our hosts and for everybody who took the time to join us tonight. I'm running for Congress because I care, and I'm deeply concerned about the direction we are and are not headed right now under the current leadership in Congress. There'd be a lot of easier, other, and different things I could be doing with my time, and if I felt like we were headed in the right direction, I will be blunt with you, I would not be running for this office. It is not easy to be a candidate running for Congress in a current climate that, as everybody knows, has virtually unlimited corporate spending, much undisclosed in a world post-Citizens United. But I'm running because I care. My background, one of the things I've taken from my Jewish background is that we have an obligation not only to think critically, to ask questions, but to care for others. And I also take from it an obligation that we never stand by silently when others are being persecuted or attacked. I am more concerned than I have ever been about the open bigotry, hate, racism, and misogyny I'm seeing at risk of being normalized in this country. And I think that affects us, whether it's anti-Semitism or homophobia or Islamophobia or anything else. And that is not who we are as Americans, and I am deeply concerned about that. Priorities for me include a couple things. I would like to see us pass the Equality Act in Congress to make sure that we are extending non-discrimination protections to people, LGBT community. I would like to see us take up comprehensive immigration reform now with a pathway to citizenship. I support the DREAM Act, and I support the continuation of the policies of both DACA and DAPA. I believe this is about our future, and one of the things that we face in our future is both education, in the sense that we have an opportunity to make sure we are fully funding early childhood education, but I also agree that Congress has a responsibility. This should not be a partisan issue. If we can loan to banks at 1%, we have to do right by our students in that regard as well.
Right.
And I believe in science. Oh,
Give it up. We got so close.
it's
So close. 20 seconds. I'm like, oh, 20 seconds. Okay. Yeah, because it goes backwards. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, now we're starting the closing arguments for District 7.
Thank you all so much for having me. I know there's nothing more exciting than listening to a bunch of politicians, political candidates talk. And I understand where this race is and where I am in this race. I am challenging a very popular incumbent with wonderful constituent services. And if I was fortunate enough to gain your support and the support of others, I would certainly seek to emulate those constituent services. But what I am doing is I'm running against his voting record and for policies that I believe in. And I only have 90 seconds left, so I'm going to keep it to one issue. The Iran deal has been mentioned several times. I've said that our foreign policy is broken and that Israel and the Palestinians will not know peace as long as our policy remains broken. Now, I'm of the opinion that if you and other Jewish Americans vote for a Democrat, any Democrat on this stage, you're voting against the best interests of Israel and against the best interests of the men and women we sent to the Middle East to fight there. And I say this because I was on the ground when we transitioned from Operation Iraqi Freedom to Operation New Dawn. We knew as we were pulling out, the Iranians were pulling in. We knew that Qasem Soleimani was making inroads into the Iraqi government. The Iranian nuclear deal that my opponent and many of the other Democrats on stage voted for, it did all of those things that have already been said, but what it also did was it provided $150 billion in sanctions relief that the Iranians turned around and sent 800 million of that to Russia to buy S-300s, which are advanced surface-to-air missiles. Those missiles have but one purpose, to shoot down American and Israeli aircraft, military aircraft. And my younger brother's a military aviator. I don't think that's in his best interest, but you can go to my website, georgeforcolorado.com, find out a lot more about me, and I'm happy to take your questions afterwards. Thank you.
So you don't make people spell out your last name.
You guys don't know, there's a spelling test to get out of here. Have you been studying?
All right, to close out the evening from District 7, Congressman Ed Perlmutter.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you to NCJW for hosting this. One of the things you said at the beginning is the ability to inform voters and inform people about the positions we take, because what we're talking about is the future. Everything we're talking about here is how do we see the future unfold. And you gotta look backwards first. And I just want to say, I have my mom and dad, my sister are in the audience, and one of the reasons that I've gotten into politics was because Colorado and the United States of America have been so good to the Perlmutter family. The blessings of equality, opportunity, public education, those are the kinds of things that have allowed our family to flourish. And those are the kinds of things that I want to see continue so that all families flourish. I want to thank Mike and I want to thank George for their service to our country. We may not agree on some things, but thank you very much for your service. This is a tough election cycle, obviously. Everybody's got a lot of thinking to do. We've got to make sure that we are informed voters, that we do take advantage of this fundamental right of voting that we have. Because I share the same concerns that Morgan has, that we're pitting one group against another, which is not the way I want to see this future unfold. We're better than that. We can do better than that. We can work together. I know we can. Ken Buck and I are friends. We don't agree on a lot, but we recently agreed on a bill that where there was an override of the president's veto. We didn't agree that there should be an override. And so there are places where there's common ground for all of us. And when you bring us together in forums like this, you help us find that common ground. So I want to thank you all for listening to us tonight and wish you a very good evening and a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. So come back and say how busy you all are running your campaigns. So thanks for making the time tonight to come. We really appreciate it. Special thanks to the JCRC, the JNC, JW, and Jewish Colorado. They worked so hard, you guys, for months and months to put this together. And all of the Jewish organizations that made tonight possible. And for all of you who submitted questions, they were really good questions, didn't you think? Again, thank you all for being polite and enthusiastic when needed, and it was a wonderful experience. November 8th. Where are you guys going to be on November 8th? Election day, right? You know, here? I think you'll all have one. Guys in the house, as you're getting up, I'm supposed to tell you, join Jewish Colorado for the men's events, which is November 1st, before Election Day, with the Jerusalem Report editor, David Horowitz. There are also events coming up in November for breast cancer awareness, the Pink Shabbat, November 11th and 12th, Christmas Eve and Christmas, the Christmas Mitzvah Project, and in February, Choices is featuring two-time Olympian Allie Reisman. So plan to come to some of these events. More information in the lobby. That's all I have to say. Thank you all for inviting me to the